I'd like to call the governing board meeting for the Liberty Elementary School District to order today, Monday, June 26th, 2023, here at the Jerry Roby facility. All 5 board members are present, including Board Member Parks, Board Member Aguirre, Board Member Bixler, Board Member Kenyon, and myself, Michael Todd. Our next item will be item 1.2, Pledge of Allegiance. And Board Member Bixler, could you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our next item of business is our public meeting. Item 1.3, review of fiscal year 2023-2024. Proposed annual school district expenditure budget presented by Ms. Beth Strickler, who's our Executive Director of Business Services.
Good evening, Mr. President, governing board members, Dr. Monroe, and Liberty community. Presented to you tonight is the proposed fiscal year 2023-2024 annual expenditure budget. The proposed budget will be discussed tonight, asking later for your approval during the regular meeting. At the July 10th meeting, you'll be asked to adopt the proposed budget. Do I have a presentation? No, I uploaded it. It's attached, it's the very last one in the thing. Thank you. I apologize for that. Okay. Okay. As you recall, during the budget study session on June 12th, the data entry tab in the budget expenditure worksheet is our starting point. I wanted to show a comparison from this time last year to show what was presented during the budget revision in May and what the numbers are for fiscal year 2024. Using the information we received from Applied Economics, we are anticipating a 1.7% growth and is reflected in the ADM and Group B numbers. The difference between the amounts for Group B add-on between the fiscal year 2023 proposed and the fiscal year 2023 budget revision is attributed to the FRPL weights, which is our free and reduced population. I'll give you a minute to review this information and ask any questions you may have.
Yes, Ms. Strickler, just so I understand, 1.7 is the factor we use as far as growth. Have we not exceeded that over the last couple of years? Has our growth not been greater than 1.7?
For this year, it was a little more than 2%. And because of what we're beginning to see with constructions slowing down, Applied Economics has backed that number off a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, based on information I had during the preparation of the proposed budget, I anticipate a budget balance carry forward for the maintenance and operations budget of a little more than $2.1 million. This budget balance carry forward represents our ability to be good stewards of the funds we receive, only spending what is necessary in a fiscal year to allow for carry forward to be used the following year, especially during this time of growth and the need for additional funds as we open school number 8 in the coming years. This is information on the maintenance and operations budget balance carry forward that we have had for several years. Those are some good numbers. Cost savings year to year that allow us to carry forward for the next year for growth. I have provided you with a screenshot at the bottom of the slide of how the fiscal year 2024 override amount was calculated. This is a useful tool the Arizona Department of Education School Finance Division has provided to districts. Let me speak briefly about the state aid supplemental. This is a one-time, and I'll emphasize one-time, estimated allocation of $300 million to school districts and charter schools on a pro rata basis for either maintenance and operations or unrestricted capital outlay expenses. Districts are allowed to increase their budget limits by estimating their portion of the increase by multiplying the district's percentage of statewide weighted student count as reported on our most recent Classroom Site Fund report. For Liberty, that is 0.003493% multiplied by 300 million to give us an additional one-time budget capacity of just over $1 million. Did I say one time enough? Okay. All right. Page 1 of the budget is the allocation of all expenses, including regular education, special education, transportation, and K-3 reading. Page 4 is the allocation of all expenses for unrestricted capital. Our amount for unrestricted capital was larger for the fiscal year 2023 revision due to unexpended budget in fiscal year 22 that we could carry over after our annual financial report was completed in October 2022. It gave us additional budget capacity for fiscal year 2023. Our goal is to have a larger carryover from fiscal year 2023 to fiscal year 2024 than what is currently estimated of a little more than $678,000. You can see that $3 million for a growing district is just simply not enough for our needs. As we indicated in our budget study session, to assist our growth with funding, we ask our community to approve bond sales to supplement the funds for deferred maintenance, to build new schools, and to purchase student transportation vehicles. The proposed expenses for fiscal year 2024 for remaining bond funds from the approval in 2019 is $18 million to be used for additional student transportation purchases, deferred maintenance costs, the construction of the transportation facility, and technology upgrades, as well as upgrades for student safety and security. In December 2022, Liberty District received approval from the Arizona Department of Administration School Facilities Division for the construction of a new school for $23.1 million. When administration asked for board approval for a bond election in November of 2023, part of the ask was for additional funds for school number 8 in the amount of approximately $14.5 million to assist with the rising construction costs. Adjacent Ways, as we know, is a special district assessment for school districts for constructing, maintaining, or otherwise improving any public way adjacent to any parcel of land owned by the school district or leased for school purposes by the school district, or an intersection of any public way adjoining a quarter block in which the parcel of land is situated, and for constructing sidewalks, sewers, utility lines, roadways, and other related improvements in or along such streets and intersections. Adjacent Ways funding is needed for these types of improvements for Liberty School Road, the transportation facility new build, and upcoming construction of school number 8. Tonight presented to you is a fiscal year proposed 2023-2024 budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Oh, okay. Hearing no questions. You're off the hot seat for a minute. We'll move to item 1.4, call to the public for annual school district expenditure budget. At this time, the public is allowed to make any comments on the proposed budget. If you have not filled out a form, please let us know. We will need you to do a form, but this is, I don't think we have any ahead of time. Okay. All right, perfect. So then there's no questions from the public, so we will move to adjourn the public budget hearing, and then we'll move into our regular meeting.
Mr. President, I make a motion to adjourn the public meeting.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to adjourn the public hearing. When I call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks?
Aye.
Board Member Aguirre?
Yes.
Board Member Bixler?
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon?
Aye.
I'm also, and I will show that approved 5 yes, 0 no. Next up will be call to order item 3.1 of our general board meeting. So I will now call that meeting to order at 5:39 p.m. We have already done the Pledge of Allegiance, so we'll move to item 3.2, approve the regular agenda.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the regular agenda form consistent with Board Policy BEDB and temporarily suspend governing board policy which with this agenda may be inconsistent.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second to approve our agenda for tonight.
I just had a question. Is this the time that we should pull items if we want to pull them?
This would be a time to pull a general meeting. We would need to take action from the board to remove anything else from the agenda other than our consent. You can remove consent now, or you can remove it when we get to the consent agreement portion.
Oh, okay, right.
Okay, now you're just looking for consent?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we do have the motion and second. When I call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks?
Aye.
Board Member Aguirre?
Yes.
Board Member Bixler?
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon?
Aye.
I will show that proof. 5 yes, 0 no. Next up will be our administrative reports. 4.1, discussion review of capital spending plan for fiscal year 2023, 2024, presented by Ms. Beth Strickler, our Executive Director of Business Service.
Joining us remotely tonight is Ms. Courtney Johnson. Courtney Johnson has been with Gordian for a year and has worked with over 10 universities and school districts to educate and bring awareness to facilities and finance departments alike regarding the state of their facilities. Courtney previously worked in facilities management for over 3 years, where she gained knowledge on facility operations, budget creation, and resource allocation. The district has worked with Gordian to assist us in our capital planning as we are in this hyper-growth time. Gordian is very well experienced in that. They're strategic partners to leaders by providing the data and information needed to cultivate knowledge and drive action on campuses and school districts. Gordian has worked with 350-plus institutions, providing the full suite of Gordian solutions from facilities benchmarking and campus sustainability to facility condition assessments, serving a range of large public universities and school districts, to private colleges and preparatory academies. Gordian has presented to the board before, and we've invited them back to give us a little more information on their final results. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Beth. Good evening, and thank you for joining us once again and allowing us to join you. As Beth said, my name is Courtney Johnson, and I have been working on this project with Liberty alongside Chad Hancock, who presented to the board back in April, as well as Sarah Mason, our colleague. Together, we performed an analysis of Liberty School District, and we've created some funding scenarios to support you in your request for the bond approval that's coming up here shortly. Much of this has been presented already in the previous presentation to the board, so we're going to do a high-level recap of much of this information and focus primarily on the funding strategies. Gordian is a construction planning company that likes to be involved throughout the entire life cycle of a building. Beth did a great job at covering who Gordian is as a company, so I'm just going to do a brief recap for you all. Our data expertise provides our members with an accurate view into the business critical decisions that will be made, and our expertise allows us to help you make informed decisions around planning for the different facilities. The technology or the cloud-based platform, which we'll talk about at the end of the presentation here, will allow you to track the data, moving a little forward here, track the data and improve workflow for the district. As we move throughout the agenda today, much like last time, there are a few things that we're going to want to keep in mind. Liberty is a young district, and the younger facilities are starting to reach the end of their first life cycle. Those older facilities are requiring more expensive and extensive repairs. We'll see that the age of the district overall does have cost demands associated with it. Those demands begin to translate into our total 10-year need, which is $28.3 million, and backlog of $11.4 million. At the building level, Estrella Mountain is driving that need, and when we talk about the system level need, most of that is made up of interior shell work. This again relates back to how young the district is. As a way to address the needs coming due, as well as the backlog that we've created, we've created some of those investment strategies that will model out future need and backlog. This is the final presentation, and it takes us to the end of our SCP process work with you all, but the work does continue. We'll hand off access to our cloud-based platform that I mentioned earlier, and that will allow Beth, Jason, and the rest of the team to make updates to the data inventory as work is completed throughout the district. This is ultimately going to allow you all to be able to track the backlog and buy down progress easily, as well as the asset replacement costs in your timeframe tracking. We classify our buildings into 3 different vintages, and as I mentioned earlier, Liberty is a fairly young district, with most of its construction being built after 2005, and that makes up 90% of the total GSF. Liberty and Blue Horizons they're a part of that newest construction, as we can see in what we call that complex vintage. The construction we saw built in the mid-2000s has now reached its first life cycle. The majority of the need within those life cycles is your HVAC units and those restroom renovations. Within the next 6 to 7 years, we'll start to see the plumbing and roofing needs coming due. These are more costly repairs, so we'll want to make sure that we're planning appropriate for those. As we move into the needs section for the district, we're going to go over this information again at a high level, since it was just presented to the board. I mentioned earlier in our agenda slide that the total 10-year need for Liberty is $28.3 million with $11.4 million in backlog. Going back to what the definition of backlog is, that doesn't mean that the assets are broken. It simply means that if we had enough money, then we would have already replaced those assets, or that the assets are at the end of their useful life. We saw that Estrella Mountain, which was constructed in the late 80s and early 90s, does carry the majority of that need at $7 million. And once again, at a system level, those interior finishes are driving the need, which is mainly space renewal work, such as our paint refreshes, flooring replacements, and other small interior upgrades. Now we want to get into the strategy planning section, which is where we left off in the last presentation. We talked about net asset value, which essentially measures the percent good of a building or a set of buildings, as we can see here as we've broken it down into portfolios. To get the net asset value, we take the replacement value, subtract out the total 10-year need, and then divide that by the replacement value. This is going to give us a percentage and tell us where we fall in terms of categories. The first category we're going to take a look at here is our keep up, and that's anything that is 85 to 100%. All of these are the new or recently renovated buildings that don't require many upgrades, if any at all. Next up, we've got our balance profile stage, and this is going to be anything that is 85 to 70%. Our buildings here start to show their age a little bit, and we have some of the projects, some small projects beginning to appear. Still nothing too major. We're still in a position where we can pick our projects versus our projects picking us. That next category we have is the catch-up stage, and this is anything from 70 to 50%. This is where we start to see significant repairs and our life cycles being reached. Excuse me, trying to jump us ahead again. When we see buildings falling below 50%, or also known as our transitional phase, this is where the replacement value can be more than what the building is actually worth. So with these buildings, we want to make sure there's a strong funding plan in place before we start investing large amounts of capital into those transitional phase buildings. As we can see, we currently do not have any in that transitional phase. One of the strategies that we use to pick projects, or just as importantly, to not pick projects, there are 3 different we're going to use project scoring. And with project scoring, there are 3 different categories. Every project line is going to get a score in each of those different categories. We'll then multiply them together to come up with that project score. The first one we have is net asset value, which we just saw. Anything in transitional or below 50% will be assigned a priority of 4, which indicates high urgency or high priority. Capital upkeep will be at a 1, which is the lowest level of priority or urgency. As we move across to our different charts here, it's going to be the same criteria. So next up, we've got our investment criteria score. All of those reliability projects are going to be ranked at a 5. So again, high level urgency, and economic opportunity is going to be at a 1. When we talk about reliability, those are going to be the projects that if they're not addressed could cause they could be at risk of, if they are at risk of failure, could cause loss of space. And economic opportunity is things like replacing LEDs. As for time frame, everything in backlog is going to be ranked at a 4, and everything in that C time frame or 8 to 10 year replacement will be ranked at a 1. Our highest possible score is a 100, with the lowest possible score being a 1. We can then group that project scoring out by portfolio and display those results as you see here. The chart is measured in millions, and we have the average priority score on the right. Estrella Mountain does have the highest level of need, as we've seen before, and the most amount of high urgency projects. Those projects, like I said, they're going to be those reliability projects, and those are going to be HVAC and electrical related. Even though Estrella does have the most amount of need overall, we can see that most of those projects are either medium or low urgency. As we move across to the other schools listed here, we see that most of the need with them is either medium or low priority. These next few slides are going to detail out those funding scenarios based on funding backlog to certain levels and the impact that's going to have on the total amount of backlog as well as the 10-year need. We have the ability to not only show what that lump sum number looks like, but we can break it down year over year. The dollar amounts shown here in the chart have been inflated by 3.5% annually, with an additional contingency of 15% added to account for those soft costs. These are going to be the numbers that we're using throughout the rest of the funding scenarios that we're about to see. In the next 5 scenarios, the blue is going to represent remaining need and burgundy will be the buy down amount. This first one here estimates what the backlog amount will look like at year 10 if we're investing $1.4 million annually. We can see that backlog will increase by 25% by investing to this amount. If we're investing $2.4 million annually, backlog is neither increasing nor is it decreasing, but we're simply maintaining it. So by year 10, we're right back where we started. To begin reducing that backlog by 25%, we can invest $2.7 million annually. If we want to be more aggressive with that reduction over the 10-year window, we can invest $3 million, which will give us a decrease of 50%. The most aggressive strategy will leave us with 0 backlog by year 10, and that will have us investing $3.7 million annually. Again, with each of these scenarios that we've just seen, we'll see that backlog looks like over the next 10 years and ultimately the effects that it's going to have on that 10-year need. The total 10-year investment amount, which is what we see in the column on the far right, is the annual investment plus that remaining need. We did see in scenario 5 with the funding to 0 backlog or an investment of $3.7 million annually, we dipped into the negative numbers for years 2028 and 2029. During those years, we not only have enough money to address the backlog and the remaining need that's coming due in those years, but those additional funds could then be allocated to a reserve and then used to address other projects within that year or even future projects that we have coming due. Typically, we do not recommend funding to 0 backlog, as a healthy amount of backlog is a good thing. It shows a level of fiscal responsibility and the ability to balance some of that debt out. Our goal for the funding scenarios is to serve as a tool as you request your bond amount, as well as continue addressing the need for the district over the years. That concludes our presentation for today. Are there any questions I can answer from the group?
Members, any questions?
Yeah, Ms. Johnson, I do have a quick question for you. You were talking about the backlog and the $2.7 million yearly to begin the process to pay off that backlog. Does that anticipate that all new maintenance would be completed within that year? So we don't increase the backlog by any?
Yes, that is a snapshot in time, a standpoint in time, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll conclude item 4.1. And we will move to 4.2, which is the 2022-2023 end-of-year Acadians data report. And thank you for your time, ma'am.
Thank you.
Governing board members, I just wanted to personally introduce Rebecca Willie. She is our Ed Services Coordinator and directly supports our efforts around early literacy, particularly kindergarten through third grade.
Thank you. There, am I looking over here? Yes? Good to go here? Okay. Good evening, Dr. Monroe, President Todd, and board members. I'm honored to be here tonight to present our Acadians data from this previous school year. I wanted to start with our why. Our why is that we collectively are guaranteeing all students are going to learn at high levels. And so our Acadians measures are one way that we can measure our success with that. And some of the strategies I'll talk about tonight are what we are doing to ensure all students in Liberty School District are achieving at high levels. As a reminder, Acadians is our universal screener, which it means that it helps us identify which students who are at risk for reading difficulties, and it helps us determine which skills they need for instructional support. So tonight I'm going to share with you some high-level data. So this is a snapshot of the beginning of the year and the end of the year. This graph that you're seeing in front of you represents all students who are tested both at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. The blue represents students who scored above benchmark, green is at benchmark, yellow is below benchmark, and red is well below benchmark. And you can notice here that our kindergarten and our third grade decreased their numbers of students performing well below benchmark, and our kindergarten especially increased the numbers of students performing at or above benchmark. Our first and second and third grades remain mostly the same from beginning to end of the year, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And just a data note for you that in our data world, when we see a change of plus or minus 5%, we consider that pretty well insignificant, like it's flat. So here's just another way to take a look at that same set of data, our instructional effectiveness of our instruction during the school year. It's just another way to view that last chart that we just saw. So now let's take a closer look at each of our grade levels. So here's the data story for kindergarten this year. This is a data graph representing the reading composite score. Composite just means that it rolls all of the subtests that each of the students take into one score. You'll notice over on the far left, that green band is representing school year 16. And as it progresses towards the right, all the way at the far, it looks red, it's magenta, but it looks red, we'll consider it red here, is school year 23. So you can see the progress throughout the years. So you'll notice that this group of kindergartners this year was our lowest starting group that we've experienced since 2016, with only 25% scoring at or above benchmark at the beginning of the school year. And you'll see at the end of the year, they moved up to 75% of our students in kindergarten scoring at or above benchmark. This is a huge gift to our first grade teachers. It's a big celebration because it tells us that our students are ready for instruction in first grade. And first grade is a critical year in early literacy. So here's some more about kindergarten. So this represents nonsense word fluency, correct letter sounds. This means that 76% of our students were at or above benchmark, and that is a direct result of our kindergarten teachers instructing in explicit phonics instruction every single day. Our ultimate goal is for them to read whole words, and many of our kindergarten students were able to do so by the end of the year. Here's another sort of data graph that just represents, so you'll see the dark blue and the light blue are representing above benchmark and at benchmark. The yellow and the orange represent below benchmark, and then well below benchmark with the orange. This is phoneme segmentation, which is a critical literacy building block for our youngest readers. We ended our year with 86% of our students at or above benchmark, and this shows readiness and strong foundational skills. So we have really set our first grade teachers up for a different kind of reader coming into first grade this year. So those teachers should be really excited, and they're receiving a gift from kindergarten. So we're excited about that. So here's Pathways to Progress. So Pathways to Progress is another way that we analyze and we look at our Acadience results. The Pathways to Progress compares end-of-year scores from all students who have the same beginning of year reading composite score. We like to call it apples to apples. So these are students who scored at a certain place at the beginning of the year and what was their anticipated growth at the end of the year. So when we see students who are typical and above, these are students that are compared across the nation that started at the same exact place. And so this shows across the district that 79% of our students scored typical or above typical growth when compared to their peers. 21% scored below when we compare that same data. So then you can take a look at each of the schools to see how they compared with their Pathways to Progress. Now let's talk about first grade's data story. So you can see after the year of returning from COVID, these first graders scored just above 40%. So that's in the blue band there. You can see last year, at the end of the year, they were at 54%. This year, our students scored at 58%. So we are slowly making some gains, pulling out of that COVID, those COVID years with some growth in oral reading fluency, and we're also increasing the number of students who are able to read connected text. So in first grade, we start introducing our students not only to whole words, but they're starting to read connected text by middle of the school year and at end of the school year. So this is, while it's only about a 4% gain from last year's results, we can see that we have made some gains. This is that whole words read in nonsense word fluency. You can see at the beginning of the year that we only had 51% of our students who were reading whole words at the benchmark level. And by the end of the year, we have 75% of them reading automatically closed syllable short vowel words, which is a strong indicator of reading success. And here you see that Pathways of Progress. Again, this is comparing students who scored the exact same at the beginning of the year and in comparison, how did they score towards the end of at the end of the year. So you can see that our students scored at 58% typical and above in first grade at the end of the year, and 42% were below typical. So we've got some work to do in first grade to continue that learning of those early literacy skills. Let's take a look at second grade. So this second grade group, if you can see the historical data there, this is the group of students who spent most of their kindergarten year online. So we do continue to see the impact of COVID on this group of students, and then we'll look at it in the third grade group as well. These are the students who had that missed kindergarten year as well as that first grade year online much of the year, and we're seeing an impact from that. So we know that kindergarten and first grade years play a significant role in foundational literacy. And while we increased our overall composite score for second graders, we know that we've got some work to do here as well. This overall composite score for second grade includes oral reading fluency, accuracy, retell, and then a retell quality. You'll see that the data is mostly flat from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And what we know is when we're teaching explicit phonics, the important thing is that students are transferring that learning into text. So when they take new learning from their phonics instruction, they need to apply it directly into text, either through reading or writing. And so that's something that we're working on as a team in Ed Services, is to provide learning for our teachers, as well as opportunities built within the school day to increase time in text. We want their eyes on text. We want them applying it into writing with extended writing opportunities. Also through small group reading instruction and intentional focused instruction for individuals. So when we see all of these components in place, we know that we'll see continued growth in our students. So here's a celebration for second grade. We know that when students are able to create meaning from the text that they're reading, they can do that most often through retell. And so we can see here that we had some growth in the retell score for our second grade cohort this year. And then you can take a look at the pathways of progress where we're comparing apples to apples again. Here's our third grade group. So this is the group of students. These are going to be the kids that we're going to watch for years to come, because these are the students who are most impacted by COVID. Missed their kindergarten year, spent their first grade year online. Many of our students remained online again that following year, and so some of our students were just returning back to school during this year. And so you'll see that we had a decrease from last year's end of year composite score, and we can see that they had a slight increase from the beginning of the year. So we've got some work to do in third grade as well. But one celebration for our third grade team is the MAISE assessment. So the MAISE assessment is a measure of comprehension, and we know that when students are making meaning from the text that they're reading, that's our ultimate goal. And so we saw an increase from the beginning of the year of 43% at or above benchmark to the end of the year at 54% at or above benchmark. This is a really big measure in Acadians. It's weighted 4 times in the composite score for third grade. And so it's a really, really important skill. That we're not just only measuring the fluency, how quickly students can read. We're measuring more than just accuracy. We're really, truly measuring their comprehension. Are they making meaning from the text that they're reading? So it's an increase. It's also an opportunity for us to continue our work through putting their eyes on text more often and reading and writing. Here's their pathways to progress, where we see typical and above typical growth is at 74%. And you can see all of our schools listed there. So in summary, what are we doing to help close the achievement gap in our kinder through third foundational literacy? We are teaching systematic and explicit phonics instruction, which is so important. The science of reading backs all of that research up. Now, we also have Tier 2 reading intervention for all students, and we are providing phonemic awareness daily through the entire phonemic awareness continuum. So it doesn't just happen in kindergarten, it carries throughout our K2 curriculum very strongly. So students are hearing the sounds of language and letters, and then they're applying it directly into writing through phonics. So we know we're building a strong foundation in kinder through third. Kindergarten is establishing that strong connection between phonemic awareness and phonics by reading those one-syllable short vowel words. First grade is making that transfer to reading whole words and reading connected text. And our second grade is applying those decoding skills to read grade level text. And then in third grade, we are asking them to strengthen and read for meaning using their knowledge of text structure, their syntax, their schema, putting it all together with word structure. So what are we doing to continue to support our teachers and our students in early literacy? So we are continuing our support for our teachers through training We've got new teachers starting in about a month, and so we've got some training designed for them, as well as some sessions about digging deeper into our explicit phonics curriculum with the pedagogy and content knowledge of teaching early reading skills. This year, we also had the opportunity to train 7 in-district Reading Horizon trainers. So those folks will be able to train our teachers as well as support and coach in phonics instruction. We're also implementing student-centered coaching cycles with our instructional coaches who will help one-on-one support our teachers in becoming more effective in their instruction. We are also continuing our focus for students. We have a strong walk to read model that supports all students, from students who are well below benchmark to students who are scoring well above benchmark. Everybody gets second tier 2 level support. We are continuing daily explicit phonics instruction with a strong emphasis this year of transferring into text. We need more time in text. We need more books in the classroom. We need students reading and writing daily through explicit instruction, but also reading and writing for pleasure and independently throughout the school day. That's all I have for you. Thank you so much.
Board members, any questions? I just have nobody on there. I got one. Slide 12. If we could go back to. Oh, you do. Sorry. Go ahead.
You just seem to ask a lot. Well, could you go back to slide 11?
11. Sure.
Yeah, I noticed that the end of year score, significant improvement. That's great. But we had a box there at the bottom. What happened there? How did those guys in the far right show up when they weren't there to begin with?
Where did they come from at the box at the right?
Okay, so you've got the student performance. That's what was showing. Yeah, the far right, that kind of orange looking box.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't there at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Where did they come from?
So one thing that happens with the benchmark is, because it is a benchmark, it grows throughout the year. So at the beginning of the year, is it just one word at the beginning of the year? At the beginning of the school year in first grade, they have to just read one whole word. So they get a whole page of CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant words, and they just have to put one of them together, and the rest they can segment out each sound. So most of our, well, all of our students were able to at least read one.
Okay.
So by the end of the year, the expectation is that they're reading 13 whole words, at least 13 whole words.
Okay, so what's happened is the rigor of the assessment outpaced
Increases.
the growth of our student.
Some of
Okay.
the students, yeah.
Okay. Second question. You're right. The second, third grade from last year is where we have our major gaps. And I know that we're addressing that completely. How many of those second and third graders from last year are involved in our adventure camp?
Great question. We have approximately, I want to say about 30 to 35 second graders and 30 to 35 third graders who are at Learning Adventure Camp right now.
Okay.
Yep.
Numerically, that should make a big difference. So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Board member Kenyon.
I was just looking at the data that you put out there, and some of those numbers and kind of follows what Paul was saying with the benchmark changing over the year, right? Obviously the rigor gets more intense. So we can kind of see what's happening there, and especially for the public who don't understand the numbers, why something might go down or why is it staying the same throughout the year, just kind of understanding that. But I do want to shout out to Estrella Mountain Principal Boris. She had some good numbers on there, really good numbers on there, and that helped lift the entire district. So maybe we can take a look and see how good she's doing over there, and her team, I'll say the team. I know she always says the team, but you're the leader over there, so thank you. Yeah.
Great. And yeah, I mean, we study success, and that's what we do. So we
Yep.
take a look at what's working well. What we know is that teachers who, and this happens at Ms. Boris's school, teachers who teach to that transfer piece, so they don't just teach the phonics lesson. It goes beyond that. So kids are put into text, and this is happening throughout the district, but what we know to be effective is that consistent practice of transferring into text. And that's what we need to continue.
Anyone else? I just have one question, kind of dovetailing on Board Member Kenyon. Slide 12. There is a considerably large difference between Estrella and Westar there. Very similar demographics of those two schools, probably the closest demographics of any schools. Do we know why that is there, and is there a plan to bring those numbers? Those are significantly, they don't match anything else.
So keep in mind that this is the Pathways of Progress. So this is not the percent of students who scored at or above proficiency. So we would see a different data story if we looked at the number of students who are at or above proficiency. What this data tells us is that compared to other students who started at the same place, so when we have students who start at a little bit higher place, which often happens, we know at schools like Westar and Estrella, they come into us a little bit higher elevated. It's harder for them to grow more. So their anticipated growth is, we still expect anticipated growth for them. They just didn't grow as much as their peers across the nation. Students who come in much lower also have a steeper trajectory, and we can just see that's just what the data shows. So what's our plan is that we're working with the principals, we're talking with them about effective strategies, and truly it is that teaching to the transfer, getting books in the hands of children, getting students to write independently regularly. Those are the things that we know will make an impact.
I'll just also add, we were having a conversation today with the principal and assistant principal at Westar and speaking about the difference between proficiency and growth, right? So one thing that you will again see when AASA scores come out is our more affluent schools have greater proficiency, but we're not seeing as much growth, right? So some of our less affluent schools do not have the great proficiency, but huge gains in growth. Remember, that was put in place to make it an even playing field, if you will. Yep. However, in speaking with Mr. Bogart as well as Miss Lovelace today, they're like, no way, we have to be growing kids. And we're going to be looking at that more closely next year. And so even today we were putting strategies in place with what do we do next and how do we intervene even sooner so that we're paying attention to growth.
And we know our teachers need continued support. Part of my role is also working with our new teachers, and we had a huge number of new teachers last year. So it was their first exposure to some of their first exposure to teaching, first exposure to the classroom, first exposure to curriculum. And so we know that we need to continue our support in effective instruction in just pedagogy as well as our curriculum, getting to know it really well and know what is effective in the classroom and providing structures within the classroom to be effective educators.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So I appreciate that you guys put this Pathways to Progress up, because what I see is that even with the affluent schools within the district, as you talked about, but see, this is compared to nationwide. So what I see as a board member is I see the attitude of the state of Arizona and their lack of investment into education. That's what I see. So thank you.
Our next item will be 5.1 Governing Board Updates. Start with Board Member Kenyon.
Governing Board update. There's two things I would like to recognize. One is he's not here tonight, but Jason Nuttall. As we know, last board we approved his resignation and he's moving on to a better world. And I just want to recognize him. I was hoping he would be here, but he's out enjoying himself, which he deserves that. So just want to recognize him. The second person I would like to recognize tonight would be Athena. And so I think Superintendent has something for you that we would like to give to you tonight.
Yeah, I think on behalf of the board and the cabinet, we wanted to thank you, and you'll definitely be missed. We're so happy that you'll still be in the family here over at Blue, but we wanted to give you some flowers and just recognize you and thank you for your service. How about a round of applause? Sorry, Athena, you gotta do a picture.
Oh, good. I don't have my thing on.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about the cold hand.
Okay, next will be Board Member Bixler.
Yes, I have a couple things also. The first of which I want to thank Dr. Monroe so much. We had requested that we have an opportunity to go look at the summer school program that we're running this year. And last Thursday we had that opportunity, so we went and took a look at our adventure camp. And oh man, over 200 kids involved, more than 16 teachers. It's just been an amazing thing to look at. As a building principal, I always struggled with summers as to what to do differently for the kids that we didn't quite meet their needs during the school year. And to see what we're doing differently was just fascinating, and it is going to make a difference. I'm just absolutely convinced that it will. The engagement of the kids that were in the classroom, remember, these kids are kids that did not have success to begin with, and they were so engaged in the instruction. One of the things that made it that powerful was the fact that the class sizes were so small. We had a large number of teachers that ponied up and volunteered to be a part of this program, which, boy, I can't thank them more for being a part of that, because that's what's making the difference, is the number of professionals in the classroom working with those kids on a daily basis. We are going to see a difference. I want to congratulate the team that put together our Adventure Camp program. Looks good to me. I'm excited about what we're going to see. We also had kind of a quick discussion about accountability. How will we know what difference is made? And so we're going to kind of take a look at that. And I think at the end of the year, this coming year, 23-24, we're going to be able to say that the kids that we saw in the summer program had this kind of growth compared to the kids that didn't. I think it'll be a real interesting document to look at. It'll be a set of metrics that ought to be really good to see. That's the first thing. Wonderful program. Venture Camp looks great. I'm real excited about what will come out of that for our school year next year. The other is I also want to recognize a person. One of the new additions to our district is Dr. Ed Sloat. And Dr. Ed Sloat is for me, he's a number cruncher. He lives in a world that I have absolutely no connection to. But he has recently been recognized. He co-authored, through his work at ASU, he co-authored a publication that has been recently publicized or publicated, and I want you to know it has been published, pardon me, and take a look. It is a research study, and it is contained in, if you have a chance to read this, Studies in Higher Education Journal. So if you want to, go there, take a look, see the published work of Dr. Sloat. It is good, and it's great to have Dr. Sloat here in our district and a part of what we see. His ability to show us numerically what is going on has really made a big difference. So we want to congratulate Dr. Sloat and his having that published piece.
Board Member Guire, sorry. Just have a couple things. One, I was a little remiss in our last presentation on Acadians. I wanted to again drive home the win for the kindergarten team. That's a challenge, and they're doing great. So so without forgetting them, we want to know that this board recognizes their hard work. Appreciated. A couple other things I too wanted to just kind of dovetail on Dr. Sloat. You know, we're starting a trend here, and I don't know who's next, but every meeting we're recognizing somebody for being board certified nationally, being published nationally. When we have those things happening, that says we've got great people here. And I talk about the great people a lot. It's a good habit to have. The alternatives would be much worse. But again, thank you to Dr. Sloat. It's nice to know that we've got people who are looking at his work across the nation to better their schools, and they're learning from it from right here. So thank you for that. Last but not least, just the board today conducted a work session and focused a lot on some communication between the board and the new superintendent, how that will go down, looking at some emergency communication procedures so that we can better communicate with the public in the event of an emergency or just day-to-day things. So 4 board members were able to attend. I think it was very good for us, and I think we're focused on, just as our teachers, we want professional development. One of the things I wanted to bring here is his professional development as well for the board so that we can continue to learn, because it's ever-changing with laws and other things that take place. There's a lot of things that happen, and we want to stay up on it. So that concludes my report. But again, thank you to the kindergartners and Dr. Sloat. It's amazing news. Next up will be 6.1, the guidelines for our public comment. We just have one. It's from Michael. Common spelling. That guy right there. Thank you. We just ask you keep it within 3 minutes, please.
Dr. Monroe, President Todd, the board members. My name is Michael Keepleback. I'm with FCI Constructors, here with Anthony Haverkamp and Shirley Barker. The award of the transportation hub a couple of weeks or a month ago or so, I want to apologize. I was on the road, not maneuvering traffic very well, and I showed up late to the award. Ultimately, I'm here to say thank you. Thank you for awarding it to FCI. We are extremely excited to be part of the team. We are looking forward to working with Liberty Schools and developing a relationship with you and looking at potentially are just bringing in a really good project. So I want to say thank you to the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next up will be our consent agenda. Is there anything the board would like to have pulled?
I'd like to pull items 7.3 and 7.6.
Okay, 7.3 and 7.6. Anything else? Okay, hearing no other requests, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exceptions of 7.3 and 7.6.
Mr. President, I move that we accept the consent agenda as written with the exception of 7.3 and item 7.6.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
Sorry, who was the second? Mark was, okay. I have a motion and a second. When I call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks?
Aye.
Board Member Aguirre?
Yes?
Board Member Bixler?
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show that approved 5 yeses, 0 noes. We'll move to 7.3, which is approval of personnel action items. Board
Yeah,
Member.
it's recommended that the governing board approve the personnel action items, which may include new hires, resignations, terminations, retirements, change of assignments, leave of absences, supplemental compensation. Information regarding the personnel action item is attached. Mr. Nettles not here, and so we'll do our best to, between Natasha and Beth and I, to answer the question, but administration will recommend approval of the personnel action item.
Board Member Aguirre, did you have questions on 7.3?
Yeah, I just had a question about the compensation for administrative assistant superintendent. Is that on par? I just don't remember it being that high in the past with the previous administrative assistants.
When we, Board Member Aguirre, when we look at compensation and salary schedules, we look for like experience when we place people on those schedules. And so if there's any discrepancies in between other people that were hired or people that are now, those will also be looked at. But it is on par with what we saw with the experience that the new person has.
Okay. I was just wondering about the optics of what that says to the teachers, because we have a pretty significant amount of teachers that don't even make that kind of money, so. The other question that I did have was on here, I'm seeing stipends in the amount of $2,500 for Miss Camp, Stephanie Mohorn. And it's for fiscal year, it ends in fiscal year 24. What is that stipend for? It says mileage.
Correct, I do get a mileage stipend in my contract, but I don't know if that's actually the mileage stipend or vacation.
So there's two, right?
Correct.
So there's one for vacation and then there's one for mileage. So is it 2,500 a year?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And what about for Miss Mohorn?
I believe that it would be the travel stipend for the upcoming year if she's approved tonight.
But she hasn't been approved yet. She's not an employee of the district, right?
Hopefully she will be soon enough, or the consent agenda. Yeah, once this is approved, yeah, she would be.
Once this is approved?
Actually, no, she's got a separate agenda.
Oh, her name, that's right. Her name is on the general, I think it's 8.2 would be her approval.
But we're approving somebody for compensation that's not an employee of the district. For something, for someone who is an employee of the district.
Yeah, so, and hopefully we'll approve her in 5 or 10 minutes. So as a point of order, I suppose we could have reversed that order for her to be approved first, but we had it on the personnel agenda item first.
Okay, thank you. No further questions
So,
for 7.3.
members, if you would prefer, we could hold this until we get to 8.2, and then we could come back and vote for 7.1 if you want. Would that make things more clean for you, Mr. Aguirre?
That's up to the board, not up to one individual
I
board
know,
member.
but I'm just asking you if you would prefer that, and then we can ask the rest of the board. Okay, we'll go for it now. Okay, so that's 7.3, so we'll take a motion for 7.3. To approve 7.3.
I make a motion to approve all the items contained within 7.3, with the exception of Ms. Mohorn, who is not currently an employee of the district.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks?
No.
Board Member Aguirre?
Yes.
Board Member Bixler?
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon?
I'm gonna say aye.
I will also be an aye. So that was approved, 4 yeses, 1 no.
I'd like to explain my vote.
Go ahead.
I do think that, these probably should have been in a different order. Although I do see that this compensation wouldn't start until July 1st anyways. Just procedural, it looks like it probably needed to be in the correct order. So I'd like that to be brought back up as soon as she is hopefully brought on.
Will do. We can bring that back at the next meeting.
I would also explain my vote and say that her stipend wouldn't happen without her contract being approved. She's not entitled to that. She'd have to have a contract that would call for it. Right now, she does not. So I think we're safe with that. It's just a consent agenda item. But we'll clean it up for the next time. Our next item to be reviewed is 7.6. And Board Member Wire, you had some additional questions.
I was just wondering, I'm looking at this and looking it up. I'm just wondering, we already have a lobbying firm who we're a member of, the ASBA. And I guess what I'm asking is this additional $5,000, how does that help student achievement within the district?
The Education Finance Reform Group specifically lobbies for school finance issues. It's my recommendation that the board consider and approve that due to in a growth area where we're growing and building schools, we need to be able to influence legislation. We need to be able to make sure we call attention to the unique problems or opportunities we have in Liberty with regards to finance, building schools, bonds, overrides, a lot of the things that the state doesn't fund us on that you pointed out earlier in the meeting. So I guess you could tie that to student achievement, I suppose, but when we're starved for going to our local voters to approve bonds and overrides, we need to have a seat at the table with our legislators, and we need to be able to have these conversations. The Educational Finance Reform Group allows us to do that, allows us to influence that, and not just for Arizona in general, but for Liberty. Again, it would be my recommendation that the board approves it. However, I work for the board and I'll do whatever the board directs. There are lobbying efforts that happen for our district with regards to ASBA. However, I would say they're probably not as hyper focused on finance as I would like them to be.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll take a motion for 7.6.
Mr. President, make a motion to approve 7.6, approval of the EFRG membership IGA.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second?
You have a motion and a second. I call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Aguirre.
Yes.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We will show that approved 5 yeses, 0 noes. Okay. We'll now move on to caught up here. 8.1, discussion consideration for approval of fiscal year 2023-24 proposed annual school district expenditure budget. Ms. Beth Strickler.
Okay, so presented to you earlier was the proposed budget. So districts are statutorily required to prepare a proposed budget by no later than July 5th and furnish it to the Superintendent of Public Instruction and the County School Superintendent's Office. The district must also publish a summary of the proposed expenditure budget and a notice of the public hearing and board meeting to adopt no later than 10 days prior to the meeting. If districts budget for an increase in adjacent ways, a truth and taxation notice must also be published. We will be publishing the truth and taxation notice and the notice of the public hearing for the July 10th meeting. The administration recommends that you approve the proposed budget as presented earlier.
Can I ask one question? You said we have to have this approved by July 5th, but then you said we're noticing a July 10th meeting?
Correct. So there's 3 stages to this. We do a proposed budget, which has to be done by July 5th, and then the board has to come back and adopt that proposed budget
Okay, sorry.
by July 15th.
Great, thank you. Yeah, members, I'll take a motion.
Before we go there, just a quick question. I'm sorry, Mr. Strickler. Do we have any anticipation as to when we're going to find out what the ESA growth is going to do as far as the impact on our budget?
I think the growth in the ESA, the educational service vouchers, that process has taken everybody by surprise. That's the $7,000 that parents get for students in private schools or tuition-based schools, and it's taken everybody by surprise. I don't know a time frame for that, although it will be a hot topic among schools this year to pay attention to it.
I would imagine until that's resolved, our budget will not be approved by the state, will it?
No, our budget is approved.
Oh, it is approved?
Yeah, the budget piece did get approved by legislature. There's
Okay.
a whole bunch of other things that didn't get done, but
Oh, good.
budget-
I was worried that we didn't have it approved yet, so.
no, the budget is approved.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Take a load off my back.
Okay, I'll take a motion in a second.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the fiscal year 23-24 proposed annual school district annual school district expenditure budget.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the 2023-24 proposed annual school district expenditure budget. Call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Aguirre.
Yes.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Will show that approved. 5 yes, 0 no. Next up will be item 8.2, discussion consideration for the approval of Dr. Stephanie Mahorn for the Assistant Superintendent of Support Services position for fiscal year 24. Dr. Monroe.
President Todd, members of the board, administration's recommending Dr. Stephanie Mahorn for the assistant superintendent position. We're very excited about this. Dr. Mahorn has 5 years of experience as an assistant superintendent, was recently a finalist for the interim superintendent position here in Liberty. The board spent a lot of time and knows her well. Her contract will begin on July 1st. In addition, Dr. Mahorn would be able to begin tomorrow, pending the board vote, receiving a daily rate stipend until her fiscal year 24 contract would begin next week. Her resume is attached. I'm very excited about this hire from the references and also from the many times that I've been able to spend with Dr. Mahorn. I think this is a win for Liberty Elementary School District. She may be living out of boxes here because she just moved a few days ago, but I'm really grateful that she's here. So administration would recommend the approval of Dr. Stephanie Mahorn for the Assistant Superintendent position for fiscal year 24.
Members, any comments, or you take a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve Dr. Stephanie Mahorn for the Assistant Superintendent for Support Services position for fiscal year 2024.
I'll second.
I just had a couple questions.
Okay, we can do discussion now.
How long was the position posted in the public forum for?
I want to say the position was posted for, I'd have to check back, 7 or 8 days, I want to say.
Okay. Is that standard for administration position within the district?
I don't know if that's standard within our district. I knew that we had a really good candidate from the superintendent position, hiring position, and I knew Dr. Mahorn was also being sought out and looked at for other districts. So we were able to land and make an offer to her pending the board approval. But to answer your question, I don't know if 7 or 8 days is standard in Liberty. I don't know that question.
How many applicants did we have?
For a while there was 0, but I think there might have been 2 or 3 by the end of the position being posted.
And did we interview those 2
No.
or 3? We didn't interview anyone?
No. We interviewed Dr. Mahorn for the position.
But no one else?
Correct.
I guess my concern is there's been accusations before from the public about favoritism with administration. And the optics of this is my concern, that maybe we didn't follow district norms all the way.
I would say to that, my answer to that would be when you recognize talent, you want to be able to get talent. And I was just hired 5 weeks ago. So Mr. Nettles leaving, and we're very happy for Mr. Nettle, was a surprise and a shock. And we didn't want to make a sloppy decision. We wanted to take our time. However, when we recognized really good talent out there, we wanted to be able to extend that offer and have that out there before an individual would take another job per se.
But we did, again, the concern is, I hear what you're saying, but we didn't interview any of the other applicants, so we don't know what their talent level was.
That's correct.
So again, the concern I have is the optics of this and how this looks to the public. So with that,
Understood. I think the proof will be in the pudding, and very soon, I think, hires are paid off, and people work really hard every day to prove their value as they're hired. And And I think very soon it won't be an optical concern when we see the quality of work and the professionalism that we've been able to bring on board in Liberty.
I think it does continue to be an optical concern, especially for the employees within the district, that I don't think that they had to go through this type of process, that theirs was much more vigorous.
I would also respond and say the opening perhaps wasn't created in the middle of June when we had a July 1st, new starting position as well. So I understand your concern. We can continue to look at that and do better moving forward. However, I think I would recommend this hire to the board.
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, we have the motion and the second. When I call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Aguirre.
No.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We will show that proof 4-1. And I'd like to explain my vote. I'll go after anybody else if they want to. Okay. Members, anybody else want to explain their vote?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So in public education, we have a theme that the light tells the truth, and that's why we have interviews, so that we can always remain above water with any type of allegations that could possibly come our way. We have a process within the district that's been followed with other employees, other administrators, and I think it's very important that we have a consistency, especially when we have constituents who say otherwise, who say that there is favoritism. That's why I voted no, not because of the candidate, because of the process that was used. Process matters.
Members, I voted yes. We had the opportunity to meet with Ms. Mahorn on 2 occasions with interviews. I am quite confident that this board felt she was very qualified and capable of also taking the role of the interim superintendent. Not only did I meet twice with the board with interviews, but I was around with both Dr. Mahorn and Dr. Court Monroe as they toured the campuses. Ms. Mahorn is a true professional. In government, so often we move so slow. And to be a successful organization, we must identify good candidates and be able to create positions or hire people at a moment's notice, especially in this environment today, where most everybody was under contract. We got very lucky with Ms. Mahorn, who was looking to move to Arizona. She came highly recommended by our search firm as well, who was helping us with the interim role. I have full faith in Dr. Monroe as he interviewed her. Furthermore, I would take that, it's not so often that somebody hires their competition, but a good leader recognizes when the competition is also a compliment to them and to the team, and I think that's what we have here. So with that, I am very thankful for Ms. Mahorn. I'm excited to have her, and I know that the proof will be in the pudding, and this conversation will be a laugh in a few months when we see the success of this leadership team. Next up will be item 8.3, discussion consideration for the approval of the 2023-2024 Parent-Student Handbook. Dr. Monroe.
Yeah, President Todd and members of the board, as the board would recall, this was pulled from the meeting. This last board meeting, it was pulled from the agenda in order for staff to be able to do some work that we hadn't closed the gap on. I appreciate the work of Mr. Nettle, who put a lot into this handbook over the last few months, among other people. It would be my vision in the future that we better collaborate with Buckeye Union on this handbook. I have had conversations with their superintendent and shared our draft of our handbook with him a few weeks back as well as moving forward involving staff and parents more through the process, maybe even our site council. So administration would recommend the approval of the school year 23-24 parent-student handbook. The board can see all the changes, the strike-throughs, as well as a new fresh one. There's bullet points there to really highlight some of the things that have been changed or updated. We've tried to go over this with a fine-tooth comb. There is such a thing as staring at a document too much where it kind of blurs, and so we've tried to put it in front of a lot of eyes, but to try to capture a lot of different mistakes. I know President Todd brought up to me earlier today about my title in there. That was a really good example of a miss on my part. It says superintendent, should say interim superintendent. Unfortunately, that's been happening a little better, or a little to me, and I'll need to do a better job of just recognizing that. So administration would recommend the approval of the 23-24 parent-student handbook.
Did we get board members Kenyon's name spelled correctly on the most recent revision? I'm just opening it up. It was
Yes.
off before. Okay.
Yeah.
He's Chris with a K.
I opened it up to make sure.
I was trying, but
I
it's still trying to
apologize,
load. so
Mr.
I just
Kenyon.
wanted to
Yeah,
make-
apologize.
Chris with a K, and he charges no extra for that spelling, I guess. So
Right.
taxpayers, don't worry, it doesn't cost you any more. Okay, with that, then I'll take a motion and a second.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the 23-24 parent-student handbook.
I have a second.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks.
Can we have discussion?
We can if you'd like it.
I just had well, there's a few questions that I had on this. In regards to the COVID language that's in there, where's that recommendation coming from to remove it?
A lot of the COVID language in nearby school district handbooks is being amended or removed or treated as kind of the infectious disease. And so because a lot of the county recommendations there's legislation around those, we felt that we would just remove the language and treat it as just kind of I think it's infectious or communicable disease is that section there.
The reason why I ask is that there's nothing in there. It's all recommendations, kind of like the recommendations on taking Tylenol and ibuprofen that are just above it. They're all just recommendations. And I guess the concern I have is when I read the state website, the Arizona Department of Health, that we actually have their same exact language of they're just recommendations. Because we're not in the business of, right? So that's the concern I have, is that we're maybe not acknowledging it anymore. And have we checked with our insurance company to make sure that we're not liable for anything?
Yeah, we have Member Aguirre, and then we also, as I talked with Mr. Nuttles, we discussed this. I asked if we had any questions even regarding COVID last year from his office, and he said he didn't have one question regarding COVID from the schools about it.
Okay, so we've checked with the insurance though to make sure that there's no liability that it can't be perceived that we're swaying from any recommendations that the state health department.
Correct. A lot of districts are going in this direction, treating it as a communicable disease. I think is the right term. And then if parents are to call, to relay the recommendations that Arizona Department of Health might have or what have you. So
Understood. Okay. The other concern that I had is, for a long time we haven't allowed electric motored bicycles and scooters because we don't allow motorized. So we've just kind of taken the stance, and I'm wondering where that recommendation to bring that back is coming from.
my understanding, Board Member Aguirre, is that Mr. Nettle had communication with principals to see, is this really happen? Are there electronic scooters that are coming to school? And there were a few schools that had them, and the principals were okay with those being allowed. And so that's why that change in the handbook occurred.
Okay, is there gonna be, is the district liable for anything? Because just reading up on it a little bit, just doing due diligence here. Fire suppression, is that gonna be needed for lithium battery explosion? Also, I was looking in the state websites. Do we need to look in to make sure that these motors cannot exceed 25 miles an hour? These are all just liability questions that I have.
No, that's a good question. I don't know specifically on those. We will find out. That's a very good point.
So the public knows, apparently 25 miles an hour that's like warp speed apparently to the state, and you gotta have a driver's license, so. Again, and then one other thing that I did see in there, page 29, behavioral expectations. So it talked about students could be disciplined. The student may be disciplined for off-campus behavior that affects the school or the district in any way. And where's that recommendation coming from?
Can you say that one more time, Mr. Aguirre? I'm
Yeah,
trying
it's
to find
under,
it
it's
on
on
the page.
page 29, and it's under behavior expectations, and it's kind of towards the bottom of that first paragraph, second to last sentence. The student may be disciplined for off-campus behavior that affects the school or the district in any way. That looks to be an addition.
Well, I do know that we have responsibility for the kids. Okay. I know we have responsibility for the students when they leave their house in the morning all the way until they get there after school. And so if the students were to get into some behavior on a school bus or in a fight, that there could be school consequences that take place, even though it's off campus. The same thing goes for if there's a volleyball game after school, field trips, if students misbehave, that those kind of consequences could potentially be levied if need be.
And I agree with that, because in the statement, in the sentence just before that, it talks about what you're talking about as far as accountability and integrity. And it says, this includes their time at school as well as going to and from school, at a bus stop, and at school-sponsored events. So I think that everything's covered in that previous statement, because the concern that I have is the addition is, it wasn't too long ago that the Supreme Court actually just ruled that districts cannot punish students outside of school. It was a freedom of speech case. So that's my concern, is that if we have students who are venting and it gets on social media, that the district could actually take action if they wanted to, and if the district did take action, that the district's actually going to go ahead and have a lawsuit against them and they'll lose.
Well, it's a good question, Mr. Aguirre, and I'll have to check with Mr. Nettle on that specifically. You bring up social media, and that could be part of the rationale that he got with legal to add a sentence like this because of social media speech that could creep into the school as far as bullying or other things and manifest itself into behavior. I don't know if it's that angle or not, but I will check and have to get back with you to explain the rationale and kind of the legal basis of that sentence.
Okay.
I also believe there was some discussion if a threat is made off campus to a school, that can fall under discipline. The school can take also, correct?
Absolutely.
So I think that's what that statement also covers.
Yeah, it's all covered in bullying. It's already covered.
Yeah.
In the previous pages
Un-
of
underst-
the handbook.
Right.
Yeah,
itself.
understood. I don't know if it's emphasis. I don't know if there was a legal rationale. I don't know if there were things that happened at the school last year where we really wanted to emphasize that to parents. I'm not sure, but I'll get that answer.
There was one other thing, or actually two other things, I apologize, that school expectations include the following, and it has a list. Item number 6.
Can you give us a page number so we can reference it?
Yep,
Thank you.
29. We're still on
Oh, okay.
29. School expectations include the following, items 1 through 6. Responsible and appropriate use of personal cell phones, Apple Watches, AirPods, etc. So I guess I may be a unicorn here when I say this. I don't think that kids should have cell phones. I don't think they should have electronics at school. I think that school is a place that we come to learn and that they socialize with one another. That maybe we could just take a break from. So I'm just curious if there's any way we might be willing to remove that, or if that was something that is a.
Again, Member Aguirre, I'd have to bring back Mr. Nettle and some of our principles on that. Again, having only been here 5 weeks, I know cell phones are very, very challenging to regulate and certainly ban. I would be willing to bet the majority of our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders by a wide margin have cell phones. And So it just may be hard to, I don't know if that's going to be a hard to regulate thing or hard to control. I know in previous districts, cell phones have been allowed. We've just had to teach responsible use, and oftentimes they were used for assignments and things in the classroom because that's the world the kids are growing up in. So I would have to get to Mr. Nettle and have some principals comment on that. It would just be very difficult to stop students from having cell phones, and we'd probably bring down a firestorm on us from the public and parents, I think, if we were to take our middle school students' cell phones away from them throughout the day.
Yeah, I'd
But-
be fine with that.
But I can get you some background on that. I don't want to speak for the principals and Mr. Nettle on that, but like I said, without knowing much, I would bet most of our students 6th through 7th and 8th grade have a cell phone on them that their parents buy for them.
The last thing that I had, and I hope that the board can agree with me on this one, is the board meetings, on page 4. On page 4. Is it 4? No, I apologize. Page 3. Could we please reschedule September 11th?
Member Aguirre, you're talking about page 3, the governing board meeting schedule.
Yes.
So there's a board meeting scheduled on September 11th.
Yes.
That would certainly be something up to the discretion of the board, or we will do whatever the board directs.
I'm fine with that.
And the only other question I had is, has this student handbook, has legal looked at it and blessed it?
My understanding is yes.
Okay,
However, there's a few of these items that you've brought up that I want to get some extra to find out about.
Okay.
Okay, members, we currently have a motion and a second on the table to approve this handbook. When I call your name, I'll need to hear your vote. Board Member Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Aguirre.
No.
Board Member Bixler.
No.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We will show that proof. 3 yes, 2 no. And I will explain my vote. I think we're okay on this. I would ask staff that they follow up with these questions, and before we release this, let's make sure we're definitely buttoned up on the questions.
Will do.
Okay. Next up will be item 8.4, discussion consideration for the approval of reclassification for transportation staff. Dr. Monroe.
President Todd, members of the board, administration's recommending a reclassification for bus drivers, bus driver trainers, lead mechanic, and transportation supervisor positions. I know this is something that Mr. Nettle, Dondi have worked on quite a bit over the last few months, and I appreciate their work. Recruitment and retention of transportation staff has continued to be a challenge. Market comparisons with some of our surrounding districts indicate a need to increase our hourly wages and/or salaries. So the recommendation includes those following bullet points: honoring all years of validated service of successful experience for both our existing drivers as well as new hires moving forward, reclassification of drivers and transportation dispatch from level 8 to 9 on the support staff wage schedule, reclassification of bus drivers, trainers from level 9 to 10, the reclassification of the lead mechanic from position from level 9 to 11 on the support staff wage schedule, as well as the reclassification of the transportation supervisor from band 3 to band 4 on the exempt support staff salary schedule. The expected budget increase to the M&O budget is about $55,000, and a revised support staff wage schedule to reflect the recommended reclassification is also attached. So administration would recommend an approval of the reclassification for our transportation staff.
I'll take a motion a second, then we can have discussion.
Make a motion to approve the reclassification for support staff.
Is it support?
Second.
Hang on, are we support staff or transportation staff?
That's transportation staff.
Your motion was support staff.
Did I say support staff?
Yeah, I wonder if I said support staff.
I apologize.
Yeah, administration would recommend approval of reclassification for the transportation staff. I
apologize.
think I said it wrong, actually.
No, I think I read it.
I think
for
your
some
intent
reason.
was okay, so I think we're okay to just
Apologize. I meant
restate your
so-
motion and then we'll do a second.
Yeah. I make a motion to approve reclassification for transportation staff.
Okay, now we need a second. Still second.
Second.
All right. Still everybody agrees. Perfect. Okay. Well, when I call your name, please specify your vote. If there's no, is there any more discussion? Okay. All right. When I call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks? Aye. Board Member Aguirre?
Yes.
Board Member Bixler?
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Will show that approved. 5 yes, 0 no. Next up is 8.5, discussion consideration for the approval of fiscal year 24 renewal of Yellowstone for contract services for district-wide groundskeeping. Dr. Monroe.
Yeah, the administration is recommending the approval of the FY24 renewal of Yellowstone for contract services for district-wide groundskeeping. The details are below there as the board can see. This year there will be a more robust package. I've talked with Kevin various times. I've talked with Mr. Nettle. We need to have this in place for our landscaping efforts to continue. I'm not convinced that Yellowstone is the long-term solution. I'd like to work with Kevin and with others this year to see if there's better packages we can get out there to take care of our schools. I understand there's a lot of challenges that we face out here. However, for now, we feel very comfortable with this recommendation to take care of our grounds and would ask for the board's approval on that.
So just to be clear, they're going to fix the yellowness of Estrella's field
They're going to fix the yellowness of Estrella's field.
so that when I drive by it every day, I don't have to see the yellowness.
Okay, you mean because of lack of water or?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I would assume that it is a lack of
You're-
water, yes.
I will drive by Estrella because I don't want yellow fields either. I like green fields, and so I will look at that with Kevin, and I'm sure there's a good reason. Curb appeal is very important to our schools. We want schools that are appreciated in the community. So when there's broken sprinklers, high grass, yellow grass, or what have you, I don't think it serves our communities well at all, and Kevin agrees with me, and so yeah, we're gonna solve the yellow grass at Estrella,
And
whatever
I say
it
that
takes.
jokingly because I know that Kevin is massively understaffed. So,
All right. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve for the fiscal year 24 renewal of the Yellowstone for contract services for district-wide groundskeeping.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. The only discussion that I'm aware of, if anybody else has any, is I would just like to state that I do think Yellowstone needs to up their game. $355,000 a year, and our campuses are not where they should be. So when they're signing on for this, they need to do it. I would highly encourage staff to look for something better for the following year. And if we can find it this year, we'll look to get out of this thing and find somebody that wants to earn that money. And I certainly agree with Board Member Aguirre that Kevin is overworked, understaffed, and it's nothing that we can handle here. So they need to up their game, and this curb appeal needs to become a priority. It was actually one of my topics for later on in this meeting to recommend. But with that, I'll call for a vote. Board Member Parks,
Aye.
Board Member Aguirre,
yes.
Board Member Bixler,
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
I'm also, and I will show that proof. 5 yes, 0 no. Next up is 8.6, discussion consideration for the approval of OMEX and CCS custodial services for fiscal year 24. Dr. Monroe.
President Todd, members of the board, administration's recommending the approval of both OMEX and CCS for custodial services for fiscal year 24. Each of the 3 prior fiscal years have presented both staffing concerns and overall quality of service concerns for custodial. After consultation with both OMEX and CCS, a recommendation to split the school district has been made. Quotes are generated from square footage combined with a desired scope of work. Moving to a 4-day week has provided the district an opportunity to increase the scope of work given the budget capacity. Additionally, it has provided the district with the opportunity to provide a consistent scope regardless of the school. Both organizations expressed a concern with providing their services to the entire district, considering their ongoing staffing concerns themselves, but were confident that a split would benefit the district the most. So the proposed agreement split the districts as follows, and the board can see the schools under OMEX and the schools with CCS. Both companies have been made aware that continual evaluation of performance will be conducted, which may result in adjustments of schools on an ongoing basis. It's our desire to ensure clean, presentable, safe facilities for our students to access more consistently while providing the required service to our site staff to be able to do their daily work without ongoing concerns of their cleanliness of their classrooms and campuses. OMEX is on the Mojave contract, due diligence has been completed, and CCS was on the 1 GPA contract. Same as the landscaping, I would say from the board. For me, the jury is out. I'd like to have some time to work with Kevin, principals, and other staff to evaluate the cleanliness of our classrooms for our kids, for our teachers, for our staff. These are very important things that we cannot take lightly, including our grounds, and to see what our long-term plan of success will be in that area. However, for now, for this school year, administration would recommend the approval of OMEX and CCS custodial services.
Dr. Monroe, I just have one question. In the contract, and I apologize, I did not get to review this very well. Is there any scheduled walkthroughs with the principals, maybe quarterly or once a month would be even better, where they come in at a time when the principal's available and we can walk the campus and find any problems? And then secondly, I think CCS is who we had. They're Miss Boris's friend, right, down in Estrella? Did you have CCS before this year? They've been at your campus this year, right? And Miss Camerata has, I'm deaf in this ear from hearing about the lack of work they've done, so maybe we can also give Estrella a break from that group. Again, I heard loud and clear that CCS was not doing their job. I know we're in a pinch, but I think that we need to do some sort of a report card with them and at least a quarterly walkthrough and meeting to discuss what's going on, and I would say we need to make sure our principals are reporting upward quickly if there's problems on the campus. We want your campuses clean and nice and should be as close to a surgical center as possible in cleanliness. So I don't think I've raised the bar too high there. I said almost as close, not over. But that means a lot to people when they come to our school. We have a lot of businesses coming to this area, and when CEOs walk in and see junk, they take their ESA dollars and they're going to go somewhere else. So I would send a very stern warning to CCS and make sure that we can get out of this thing if we need to at any time with them, and we'll see how OMEX does.
Noted. I agree 100%.
Dr. Monroe, a couple of quick questions. First, do we have custodial staff on campus during the school day? Will this include that?
We do have one position, Kevin, or what is the name of that position again? Just custodial when the kids are in school. Yes.
So
each
there's one
school has
person
one.
throughout the district like that? There's one person at each school?
No, one at each school, right?
Yeah, and that brings up my second question. As far as the background checking that these companies do we know if they do as thorough a background check as we need? Because they'll be there when the kids are there.
Well, these companies are after school, is my understanding. However, those companies generally have to have their employees have to have a fingerprint clearance card. But these cleaning companies, correct, Kevin, it happens after the school hours?
But they're really in charge of the hiring and firing these people, right? We're contracted with them and they do all the rest.
Correct.
So we're kind of dependent upon, we're trusting that they've done their due diligence.
Correct. In these kind of things, there's an argument to be made to have those things in-house. Can you have your own people that you hire and fire, you supervise and evaluate, you train, and you pay to do the work? And then there's an argument that says, well, you can outsource that and get a better value or a better product. I don't know what that is. I know I've just had conversations with Kevin and Jason. That's why with regards to this agenda item and landscaping, I think we need to take this time to really hold some feet to the fire and review what are we paying for? Are we getting what we expect?
Yeah, I was part of an event that occurred that way. We had our own in-house maintenance and custodial, and we went to a contract, and we did discover some issues, and a lot of it kind of centered around the idea of who's really in charge of hiring and firing these people. So I was just concerned I don't want to walk into that again.
Yeah, it's I'm kind of a fence center on it. I've seen it work good on both ways, outsourcing and your staff. But I think if the board is able to approve this, it gives us some time to at least evaluate and see where we're going to go with this so that we can get a better product for our schools and our teachers. And that's what we need to do.
I would just like to make sure, although these are after hours, we do have baseball practice after hours, some other things. And I've seen just when we had stuff at Estrella, Miss Camerata chased one of these people down to tell them they had missed a classroom for apparently like the last 8 months. It was pretty rough, but there were kids all over the campus. So I think we need to make sure they're 100% compliant and provide proof that they have an adequate background check and fingerprint clearance on record with our district. They need to show us that. And if they don't have a contract, or at least they don't have an employee coming
We can,
to clean it.
I'll make sure that happens. I know that's usually a condition of working with these companies, so I'll double check and make sure.
Just make sure they understand the level of the background and that sort of thing. So, okay. So with that, we need a motion and a second for item 8.6.
Mr. President, I move that we approve OMEX and CCS custodial services for fiscal year '24.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve OMEX and CCS for fiscal year '24 to provide custodial services. Call your name, please call your vote. Board Member Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Guire.
Yes.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
I will show that approved. 5 yes, 0 no. Next up is 8.7, discussion consideration for the approval of supplemental instructional resources. Ms. Natasha Camp.
Good evening, Mr. President, governing board members. District administration is recommending the governing board approval of the phonics for reading levels 1 through 3. University of Florida Literacy Institute, we call that UFly. There will be a test later. Please pay attention. Phonics program, and then Hal Leonard's Essential Elements for Music class as supplemental resources. Administration facilitated a supplemental resource committee on March 29th. I actually think Mr. Todd was in attendance to that meeting. The meeting was open to the public. Committee members, including teachers, administrators, and parent participants were also there. The purpose and outcome of the committee was to review the quality of supplemental materials and ensure that resources used for instruction meet our district criteria, as well as to review the criteria, score the supplemental resources, and determine resources to recommend for 60-day review. The committee meeting agenda and meeting documents were posted using board docs. Committee members previewed the materials, scored each resource using a rubric of criteria for supplementary resources. During the meeting, committee members discussed the merits and/or possible concerns with each resource. Each of the resources listed were recommended based on a consensus of the committee that reviewed the resources. All resources were put on 60-day review from April 11th until June 12th to gather public input on each of the resources. No public feedback was received. Upon board approval, a list of the approved supplemental resources will be put on the district website. Again, we are recommending approval for phonics for reading levels 1 through 3, University of Florida Literacy Institute, UFly phonics program, and Hal Leonard's Essential Elements Music class as supplemental instructional resources.
Can you say that all over again?
The test.
What does UFly stand for? Open book, yes. We're the board, we can do open book. All right, with that, I will take a motion a second, then we can have discussion.
Okie dokie. I move that we approve the phonics for reading levels 1 through 3, the University of Florida Literacy Institute phonics program, and the Hal Leonard Essential Elements Music class. Supplemental instructional resources.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Your second wasn't near as fun as his motion. Okay, have a motion and a second. When I call your, is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go forward with the vote. When I call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Guire.
Yes.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
I will show that proof. 5 yes, 0 no. Next is item 8.8, discussion of first reading of policy IGD, IJJ, and IGA.
Governing Board President, members of the Governing Board. Before we even start this review, I just want to say that our district sort of led the way with these advisories coming forward. It was a little bit of a hardship on me, and I welcomed it. I also want you to know that we have created standard operating procedures, just as the agenda was stated before, on how we use open meeting law for our adoption committees. So with that being said, the rest of the world has caught up with us. Arizona School Board Association legal team has reviewed recent Arizona legislation to identify governing board policies that require updating them to align with statute. And that statute says that policy changes proposed match the ASBA recommendations. The summary and rationale for those revisions are as follows. The following policy advisories are the result of laws passed by the Arizona legislature, PA 747, and response to the open meeting law investigations conducted by the Arizona Attorney General. Boards that authorize textbook review and selection committees are subject to open meeting law. ARS 15721 F2 and 15722 B2, some of you know these by heart. There may have been multiple open meeting law complaints in 2001, 2002, and 2021, 22, and 23 about curriculum adoption committees that were not posted and did not follow open meeting law. ASBA policy services recognize that there are some groups of district professionals meeting to discuss curriculum that would not be a board authorized committee and therefore would not be subject to the open meeting law. However, policy has always authorized boards to create curriculum committees, and the clear reading of the statute subject these types of committees to open meeting law. The attached documents provide marked up proposed changes. This is a first reading for the governing board to comment and provide me with any proposed revisions. These policies will be discussed again in a second reading for possible approval at an upcoming board meeting.
So this is just a first reading and discussion. If there's any questions for Mrs. Camp, I would also just tell the board that Mrs. Camp will not be at the next board meeting, as she'll be finishing her vacation. And so if there's no questions now, and if you're reading and you have questions, to make sure you relay those to us so that we can make sure that we get the boards, before we bring it back to the board for approval, we get all your questions answered. But this is just a first read if there's any questions or discussion.
And essentially, all of these just bring us in compliance with law, so we don't have much of a choice, I don't believe. Okay. Members, any questions or discussion on this?
Just thank you.
You'll have your cell phone on vacation so we can call you at the next board meeting?
Yes.
Okay, hearing no discussion, questions, we'll move to 8.9, discussion and consideration to select a board delegate and an alternative for the ASBA Assembly. Dr. Monroe. And an alternate.
Yeah, President Todd, members of the board, the 2023 Delegate Assembly is upon us. The Delegate Assembly determines the positions of the ASBA for future special sessions of the current legislature and for the first regular session of the 56th legislature. The delegate represents our district at the Delegate Assembly, which is kind of an all-day meeting where the views of the district can be represented and discussed. That is going to be on Saturday, September 9th at the JW Marriott in Scottsdale Camelback Inn. That registration will open on the same day as the ASBA Law Conference, and my understanding is in the past an alternate has also been named by the board in case the delegate wasn't able to attend that day. Is that right, Athena? So now it's time for the board to work their magic and identify a
This time last
delegate.
year, Board Member Aguirre was so nice to recommend me, so I'd like to return the honor and recommend Board Member Aguirre to attend.
Well, I was going to
Got
bring
great
this up,
lunch.
but
If you remember, you told me that. It was fantastic lunch.
Yeah, we've shared this opportunity, this wonderful honor in the past, and it's my turn, so I'll be happy to go.
I'll be your alternate.
I would love
That
it.
works for me.
I was the alternate last time. I've stepped up. This is good.
The lunch is great.
Last time I was there, I totaled out my truck. So I would not like to repeat that.
That's not part of our motion. We'll keep that out of it. Okay. All right, so I guess we need a motion and a second. It looks like we've got Board Member Bixler and Board Member Aguirre.
Make a motion to approve Board Member Bixler as a delegate and Mark Aguirre as an alternate for the ASBA Assembly.
Second.
You guys are troopers. I appreciate it. When I call your name, we'll specify your vote. Board Member Aguirre, I'm sorry, Board Member Parks,
Yes.
Board Member Aguirre,
Yes.
Board Member Bixler,
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Congratulations. And I
If we
hope the
could,
lunch is better.
Before we move to the next item, I'm wondering if it's out of order to make a run back to 7.3 for approval of some action items that were previously not approved. I believe that we're allowed to do that legally because we have approved the consent agenda.
We can go to 7, we can go back because we've not closed the meeting. So we can go back, but I think everything in 7.3 was,
Well, there was one thing that we didn't approve, and I was going to put that on as another agenda topic, but if we can go back and do it now, that'd be great.
So if I could, I'd like to make a motion to approve Stephanie Mohorn doctorate degree stipend and also Stephanie Mohorn fiscal year 24 mileage stipend.
that was already, no, 7.3 was already done. It was a 4 yes, 1 no vote to approve 7.3.
But
And
we
there was
pulled
nothing
out.
pulled.
We specifically had pulled out that stipend, the transportation
Don't
stipend.
believe that stipend was pulled. Do you have that stipend pulled?
Athena, do you want to look back? I'm trying to remember. I thought the motion was to
The
pull it,
last-
but then it.
The
but then
last
it-
motion for 7.3 was to approve 7.3 with the exception of Stephanie Mahorn.
Okay.
There was,
It is, okay. All right, we're good. Okay, I thought it was approved. Okay, well, we can go back to 7.3.
That's what I
It would need to be somebody who is on the winning side of that, but I would still support that we pull 7.3 back up. So, Mr. Aguirre, go ahead with your motion.
Yeah, so the motion's on the floor.
If you could restate it, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. You good? Yep.
It would be your motion now to amend.
Make a motion to approve Stephanie Mohorn doctorate degree stipend and also Stephanie Mohorn fiscal year 24 mileage stipend.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the stipends for Stephanie Mahorn. When I call your name, plus specify your vote. Board Member Parks.
Yes.
Board Member Aguirre.
Yes.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
I'm also, and I will show that approved. 5 yes, 0 no. Now we can move to 8.9, discussion and consideration to, oh, we already did that one, sorry. Board, 9.1, board comments or agenda topic requests.
I just wanted to verify, I was looking in the board updates that the trust is coming out in July. Is that still scheduled?
But I believe July 10th.
Yeah, we had also discussed the moving of our September 11th board meeting. Would we need to actually have an agenda item for that, or could we just decide that later?
That's 10.1, right? Upcoming board meeting is 10.1.
Yeah, it's not on there, though. We don't get to September. It only goes to August.
I don't know what the practice of the board has been in the past, but in other lives that I've lived, we brought those items back to the board for an approval, so we can bring it back if.
Yeah, I'd like to have
We
that
need
as
to
an
do
agenda
that.
item. I'd like to take a look at the September 11th board meeting date.
Understood.
Can support that.
And if I may ask, that would that be a simple potential move that the board would like to vote on for the next night that we bring back?
Yeah,
Instead of
I
a
think-
Monday night, like a Tuesday?
Yeah, I think we're getting into discussion that we probably should hold off on till the meeting, but let's just agendize the cancellation or reschedule of the September 11th meeting. Would that suffice language-wise? Okay. All right. We'll do that one. Anything else, board members? I have a couple of things I would like to ask. Some of the campuses have done some board retreats, and I would like to have they did campus retreats, I guess, and it'd be great to see the information that was shared, what was discussed, so we know what's going on. School number 8 plans. We are getting down to the wire if we're going to hit any sort of a new school year deadline. So I think we need to ask staff to probably meet with DLR and find out where their recommendations and plans are. Maybe give a board update so we can move through there. The other thing we talked about a little bit, and I think this can just probably be done by administration, but it would be great to have a board report on it or a board update. And we talked about this a little bit ago, curb appeal. It's the summertime. We're working 4 10-hour days, but we need our staff to really look around at the schools, and it should be year-round. I received multiple phone calls from the Rainbow Valley community about the school. They're flooding with water. 2 weeks. I had somebody bring me pictures that were dated. They showed me 2 weeks of flooding. That's not good. That should not happen. Our principals need to be walking those campuses, or maintenance. Ultimately, it comes to the principal. They're the top. And we need to do a better job curb appeal. The neighborhood looks at a scar across the street. And we've done some paint improvements at Rainbow, but when the weeds are taller than the paint, it doesn't really help the paint. So I'd like to see us get aggressive on curb appeal and some responsibility of our campus leadership. It just shouldn't happen. And that's all I have. So next will be item 10.1, upcoming board meetings. We've got a couple important ones. July 10th, I believe, for the budget is critical, correct, Mr. Claire? July 31st, August 14th, and August 28th. Dr. Monroe, we're doing a back-to-school day. What day? And the board's invited to that.
You know what? 1 second. Natasha will find it.
I meant Miss Camp. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, Dr. Monroe.
You're okay.
First day of school.
Yeah.
August 7th.
August 7th.
Are we doing a kickoff for the teachers the day before?
Oh, the
Monday, the 31st.
July 31st.
July 31st. Okay, so we got a board meeting and the welcome back.
I'll make
teachers.
sure I get the information to the board as we're planning that currently.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, any concerns with those dates, members? All right, hearing none, we'll move forward to item 11, adjournment of the meeting. I'll need a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Take a second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Call your name, please specify your vote. Board Member Parks?
Yes.
Board Member Aguirre?
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon? Board Member Bixler?
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon?
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show the approved 5 yeses, 0 nos. The meeting is adjourned at 7:32.